Good morning, y'all. I used those words once before on this channel. A historic storm is coming together. I use them deliberately, carefully, with the full weight of what historic means in this forecasting community. Not as a headline choice designed to generate alarm, not as a content strategy, but as a precise meteorological characterization of an atmospheric setup that had crossed the threshold from significant into the category of events that communities remember for the rest of their lives. That forecast, verified. The event it described produced the outcomes that the atmospheric parameters it identified supported, and in the weeks since that forecast, I have covered a sequence of escalating, volatile, explosive, dangerous, severe weather setups on this channel, each one warranting the specific language I used to describe it, each one producing the consequences that the atmospheric science predicted, each one adding to what has been, by any honest meteorological accounting, one of the most relentlessly active, severe weather sequences this region has experienced in the modern record. I have been careful with language throughout that sequence. I have been deliberate about not reaching for the highest intensity vocabulary unless the atmospheric signal justified it. I have specifically avoided repeating the word historic because I did not want it to become a word that loses its meaning through repetition, a word that the communities in the path of these events begin to process as background noise rather than as the specific, evidence-based, historically grounded alarm it is supposed to be. And now, after weeks of careful restraint, after covering event after event with elevated but not historic language, I'm standing in front of you today and telling you that what the models are showing for the coming days has crossed that threshold again. Not edged toward it, not approached it, crossed it. Cleanly, unambiguously, with a level of model agreement and a suite of atmospheric parameter values that leave me with no honest alternative to the word I have been saving. Historic. A historic storm is coming together. Again. And what makes this one different from the last time I said those words, what makes it more dangerous in specific ways that demand a different and more serious preparation response, is what I want to spend this entire forecast explaining to you. Let me start with what the models are showing and why the signal is as unambiguous as I am representing it to be. Because I think you deserve the analytical foundation before you receive the conclusions. The ensemble guidance, the GFS ensemble, the European ensemble, the Canadian ensemble, all three running independently with separate mathematical frameworks on the same atmospheric initial conditions, has achieved a level of agreement over the past 96 hours that the meteorological community specifically watches for as a marker of genuine, large-scale atmospheric signal rather than model noise. Not agreement on the details. The details, the exact track of the surface low, the specific timing of the cap erosion, the precise geographic distribution of the highest rainfall totals, still carry meaningful uncertainty at this forecast range. The agreement is on the character of the event, on the class of outcome. Every ensemble member across every modeling system is depicting a major, prolonged, multi-hazard, severe weather and flooding event over the central and eastern United States. The spread within that agreement is about where and when. The agreement itself is about what. And what every member of every ensemble is depicting is an event that belongs in the historical category. An event whose parameter values, whose duration, whose geographic footprint, and whose multi-hazard interaction are consistent with the events that appear in the extreme outlier portion of the climatological record, rather than in the normal range of active spring severe weather weeks. When that level of cross-model, cross-ensemble agreement exists on the class of event, the appropriate forecasting response is not to hedge toward the moderate solution because the details are uncertain. It is to communicate the class clearly and urgently while the details resolve. The class is historic. Please act on that now while the details are still resolving in your favor, while the preparation window is still open. The feature that is most responsible for elevating this event from significant to historic is one that I want to explain with care, because it is a feature that does not appear in every major severe weather setup, and whose presence is the specific differentiator between the events that produce significant outcomes and the events that produce generational ones. That feature is atmospheric memory, not a meteorological term in the formal sense, but a concept I want to use because it captures something real and important about the current atmospheric state that the standard parameter discussion does not. The atmosphere over the central and southern United States right now is carrying the memory of the past 3 weeks of severe weather sequences. It is carrying that memory in the form of soil moisture, near saturation across a geographic area stretching from central Texas through the Ohio Valley that represents the cumulative legacy of round after round of significant rainfall from the active pattern that has dominated the region. It is carrying it in the form of river stages. Multiple major river systems running at or above flood stage entering this event. Their banks already full, their floodplains already wet, their flood control infrastructure already deployed at or near capacity from the preceding rounds of high water, It is carrying it in the form of damaged infrastructure, power grid components weakened by the previous squall line events, road surfaces, compromised by the previous flooding events, agricultural fields already stressed by the previous hail and wind events, and it is carrying it in the form of community exhaustion. Emergency management agencies that have been in continuous activation for 3 weeks, utility crews that have been running restoration operations. Without adequate rest intervals, families that have sheltered repeatedly and are beginning to show the psychological signatures of alert fatigue that make the preparation response less reliable with each successive event. The historic storm that is coming together is not arriving into a fresh, resilient, fully resourced region. It is arriving into a region that is already down, already depleted, already carrying 3 weeks of damage and exhaustion and diminished capacity. And the interaction between a historic storm and a depleted region is not the sum of the storm's impact and the region's vulnerability. It is their product. It amplifies both. And that amplification is what puts this event in the category that demands the specific word I opened this forecast with. The rainfall and flash flooding dimension of this historic event is where the atmospheric memory I described, the 3 weeks of accumulated soil moisture and elevated river stages, transforms what would already be an extreme precipitation event into something that the standard flood warning vocabulary is structurally inadequate to describe. The ensemble precipitation totals for the primary training corridor over the full event duration are 12 to 20 inches in the broad swath. The ensemble 95th percentile is 20 to 28 inches. The most aggressive individual ensemble members, which in the context of a supersaturated stalling system have historically been more accurate than the ensemble mean, are advertising 28 to 36 inches in the most focused training corridors over the Missouri Booth Heel, western Tennessee, western Kentucky, and the upper Ohio Valley, 36 inches of rainfall in 72 hours on soil that has no remaining absorption capacity, into river systems already at or above flood stage, producing a hydrological response that is not the standard flood of record for those systems. It is the obliteration of the flood of record. The Ohio River at Cairo, Illinois, the point where the Ohio enters the Mississippi, has a record crest of 60.8 feet set in 1937. The River Forecast Center ensemble guidance for this event is advertising crests at or above that value for the first time since that record was set. 80. 7 years. The record stood for 87 years, and the current model guidance is advertising a crest that challenges or exceeds it. That is not a flood watch. That is a generational hydrological event. That is the atmospheric memory interacting with the historic storm in exactly the way I described, amplifying the storm's own extreme rainfall totals through the hydrological system's pre-existing vulnerability into an outcome that exceeds what either factor alone would produce. Please evacuate flood-prone areas before the rainfall begins. Please do not wait for the water to tell you it is time to leave. By the time the water is telling you, the roads that would allow you to leave may already be gone. The straight-line wind threat from the squall line that organizes from the afternoon's supercell phase is an independent catastrophic hazard that deserves separate treatment from the tornado discussion, because its geographic footprint is larger than the tornado footprint and its infrastructure. Damage implications are the primary driver of the multi-week power outage scenario that makes the post-event period as dangerous as the event itself. The rear inflow jet of the squall line, fed by the 942 millibar surface low and the 6,000 joule cape environment, is being forecast at speeds, at the surface in the most intense bow echo cores of 100 to 120 miles per hour. 120 miles per hour of straight-line wind is not in the severe thunderstorm damage category. It is in the violent tornado damage category. It is wind that fails transmission towers, the large steel lattice structures that carry high-voltage transmission lines and that are designed to withstand sustained winds of approximately 90 to 100 miles per hour. When transmission towers fail, the restoration timeline is not days, it is weeks to months, because tower replacement requires specialized equipment, specialized crews, and lead times for manufactured components that cannot be compressed, regardless of the urgency of the restoration need. If the squall line produces 100 to 120 mile per hour gusts across a corridor that includes transmission tower infrastructure, which the track of this system makes highly probable, the power outage duration for communities in that corridor is not 7 to 14 days. It is 4 to 8 weeks. Please prepare for that duration for the communities in the primary straight line wind corridor. Please ensure that every medically vulnerable person in those communities has a plan that does not depend on grid power being restored in a matter of days. The hail threat from the supercell initiation phase, 5 to 7 inch diameter hail in the most extreme updraft environments, 3 to 5 inch diameter across the broad swath of the primary initiation corridor. is the hazard that is going to produce the most visible, most immediately striking property damage imagery in the aftermath of this event. And I want to make sure the preparation response to it is proportional to the actual scale of what that hail means for community recovery. The insurance industry's threshold for declaring a catastrophic hail event, the CAT event in the industry terminology, is $500 million in insured losses. A single major hail swath from a significant supercell in a populated corridor typically produces $1 to $3 billion in insured losses. This event, with its multi-storm, multi-state, extreme Cape hail threat across a corridor stretching from North Texas to Ohio, is being privately discussed in the insurance industry, based on the pre-event parameter values alone, as a potential $10 to $20 billion insured loss event. From hail damage alone, before accounting for the tornado and flood losses. $10 to $20 billion in hail damage means tens of millions of vehicles, hundreds of thousands of roofs, thousands of commercial structures with collapsed skylights and compromised HVAC systems, and an insurance claim volume that is going to overwhelm the regional adjustment capacity for 6 to 12 months. The recovery from the hail damage component of this event alone is not a season-long story. It is a multi-year story for the most heavily impacted communities. Please get every vehicle under cover today. Please act on this today. The preparation directive for a historic storm arriving into a depleted region with atmospheric memory of 3 weeks of accumulated damage has to be different from the preparation directive for a historic storm arriving into a fresh, resilient region. And I want to be explicit about how it is different. The standard preparation items apply and apply urgently. Tornado shelter identified, stocked and practiced. Y'all call on every phone, flood routes and alternate routes known, power outage plan for 4 to 8 weeks in the primary wind corridor, vehicles under cover, prescriptions filled, vulnerable family members with explicit plans, all of that. All of it executed today, right now, before this forecast ends. But there is a layer of preparation specific to the depleted region context that I want to add explicitly. If your home sustained damage in one of the preceding events, roof damage, structural compromise, window damage, flooding in the basement, please assess that damage specifically in the context of this event's severity. A roof that survived the previous hail event with marginal damage is a roof that may not survive this event's hail. A basement that flooded in the previous round is a basement that is almost certainly going to flood in this round and may flood more severely. A tree that was partially compromised by the previous wind event is a tree that is at high risk of complete failure in this event's winds. Please address those pre-existing vulnerabilities today with the urgency that a historic storm arriving in 72 hours demands. And please, if your emergency supplies were depleted during the previous events in the sequence, if the water, the food, the medications, the backup power that you used in the previous rounds have not been fully replenished, replenish them today. The historic storm does not know that you just went through 3 weeks of active weather. It does not discount its intensity for communities that are already exhausted. It arrives at full strength regardless of what preceded it. And the communities that meet it at full preparation, strength regardless of what preceded it, are the communities that come through it best. I am going to be live from the first supercell initiation through the last flood crest on every major river system across the full event duration. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see y'all in the live stream. I love every single one of you. The historic storm is coming together. Please make sure your preparation is too. Stay safe out there.